All right, here I am recording the integumentary system notes. I could have swore that I did this before. I can't find the file, so here I am again trying to go through this again. So it's Friday afternoon, about I don't know, let's see, 6 o'clock, and I wanted to get this out to you today. Looking for the file, I couldn't find it. So anyway, here we go. How does the skin help maintain homeostasis? I hope you guys see a trend here. Every time that we talk about a system, we talk about the anatomy, and then we talk about the function, and we talk about homeostasis. So everything's going to be focused around those three topics, right? The first thing is going to be identification, and I think you've done a little bit of this. I'm going to go through this really quickly because you need to identify things. You can just go ahead and pause the video. I know that you have the handouts that you picked up when you were getting the textbook, so that's uh, all part of the packet. So epidermis, we have the middle layer is the dermis, and the under fatty tissue is the subcutaneous layer. Up here we have number 4 is the hair shaft. You don't need to worry about the ones that are in between here that aren't numbered. We just the ones that are numbered. And then the top layer of the epidermis is made up of 2 layers. It's the stratum corneum and the stratum basale. So that's the 2 layers of the epidermis. Here we have the sebaceous gland, which you'll find out is responsible for excretion, keeping the oily texture of the skin. So that's, here's the pili muscle, the erector pili. Again, getting goosebumps, you're familiar with that. Hair follicle, so that would be the outside covering. We're going to talk about what the middle part is called as well. And then we have the sweat gland, obviously that secretes sweat. And we have the blood vessels. You can see how sort of deep the blood vessels are, and they come up pretty shallow, right? So, but they heal quickly, a lot of repetition. And remember that this layer right here contains a pigment. So this is about the size of a sheet of paper is determine the skin color. So I know that we're talking social justice, and it's just a thin layer of skin that determines the color of our skin. All right, well, the hair shaft. We have the sebaceous gland again. We have the hair root, which would be the middle part of it, as opposed to the hair follicle, which is the outside. And then we have the sweat gland again. Here's a cross section of an actual piece of skin. So you have the epidermis, and then the dermis, right? I think that's the only thing that we put on here, so you can see the how. And then you can really see a different cross section. You have the epidermis, and the dermis is a lot thicker. It's just the other slide was cut. And then you have that hair follicle. Sort of hard to tell here, but people are adept at picking these things out. You can't really tell that it's a hair follicle because it's not going all the way out. But you can tell this is the muscle, the length of the muscle. And then obviously you can tell the gland here, the sebaceous gland. This is sort of easy to pick out if you know what you're looking for. Again, we have the hair follicle here. That's a little bit easier to tell. And then the hair root that we talked about a little bit easier. Again, epidermis, dermis, sweat gland, just different cross sections of it. All right, sort of nice to get across, different views of it under a microscope. Tissues, okay, so we talk about the organization of our body, right? So a tissue would be, I'll go back up so we don't go too far ahead, is when you have similar cells together that carry out a specific function. So we're going to talk about 4 main types of cells, tissues, cells or tissues, epithelial, cells, I'm sorry, and then we put these cells together. Epithelial, connective, muscle, and nervous. Okay, so epithelial is the top layer, protection, secretion, absorption, excretion. And you can find that not only on the outside, but your stomach has epithelial cells. Anything that has a covering will have some type of skin cells. Or epithelial is the more generic, the more appropriate name. And then connective tissue, we have, you'll find out about the dense and the loose, the bind, support, protect, fill spaces. Store fat is that loose. Things like ligaments and tendons are dense. Obviously muscle, responsible for movement, attached to the bones and the walls of hollow internal organs, right? So even like our intestines have some type of and our stomach has muscle to move food around. And then this nervous, primarily communication, right? Sensory reception and conduction of electrical impulses. And then those are the three: brain, spinal cord, and nerves. Those are the three parts of the nervous system. Okay, so skin tissue. Now we're going to talk about the epidermis, which is stratified squamous epithelial. We shorten this unit. There's a lot other different types. There's columnar, all these different types of tissues that we talk about, but we're going to keep it brief. One of the things that I try to help people, that these terms are sort of going stride of what they look like. So the stratified squamous, is you can think of squamous as more of a squished, right? And it's sort of stratified, meaning that it's not columnar, right? It's sort of offset. And then we have the basement membrane, non-living anchor. And then we have the dermis. So that's a thicker, which is connective tissue, right? Collagen, elastic fibers, mostly for the elasticity we'll talk about, and then the subcutaneous layer, meaning the loose connective tissue, which I talked about before, which is the fat or the adipose. I talked about the keratin. Well, I didn't talk about it, but it's the hair and the nails mostly. It's that tough, but it does have, it's in the epidermis as well. We're going to talk about, when we talk about the immune system, we're going to talk about how it's the first line of defense, and this is part of the reason. Again, melanin, I talked about before, it's just that, like if you get a thick, a piece of paper, right? This is really how thick the epidermis is, and the dark pigment of our skin, which is absorbs UV light. So you can, the darker colors are the individuals who live closer to the equator, or they have a lot of direct sunlight, and so they need to protect the UV rays from getting in, where people in the northern part, the upper latitudes, they have lighter skin because they don't get as much sun, and so they need to have more UV light being absorbed, right? And then, if you ever familiar with childbirth, sometimes a baby can have yellow tint to the skin, which indicates jaundice, which means that, the liver is not working or the kidney is not working very well. So, and usually babies, that's normal. It just takes a few, I forget, hours or days for it to just sort of flush itself out and everything be. So the dermis is the thicker part, right? And then again, I mentioned before, it's the elasticity because it has that connective tissue in it. And then the blood vessels that provide the nutrients. And it binds the epidermis to the other tissues. Homeostasis, we'll talk a little bit about homeostasis, the regulation of body temperature. Heat is a product of cellular metabolism, obviously. It produces ATP, produces energy. If your body temperature increases, the skin releases heat, your sweat glands open and releases, trying to cool it down. You see, especially like in tennis, where the people change their shirts when they get really wet, which isn't necessarily a good thing, because you want that evaporation to keep on occurring. And once they put on a fresh shirt, it sort of entraps that and raises the body temperature. But it's not very comfortable to play. I don't think it's very comfortable to play with a really wet shirt. That's what I've been told. I'm not a very good tennis player, so I can't really attest to that. Anyway, all right, so decrease, the muscles contract, and then the erector pili muscle that we talked about contracts, and that provides the goosebumps. Also, if it's drastic enough and over a long period of time, that's where you get frostbite, right? Is that it? I think so, right? Regulation, so that's the homeostasis. Okay, so maybe I can post this, and we will have a lab on Monday, I think, right? And then we'll have, um, okay, anyway, and I posted the practice test as well, so